I have certainly watched them close enough, but I have never really been able to get to the bottom of their behavior. The Jews' way of living and of dying was a true riddle that I never managed to solve. That's Rudolph Hoess, the Commandant of Auschwitz.
Okay.
And this is Jen.
This is Becky.
And this is Too Close to Home. And this is part 3
of the Nazi edition.
Ooh, ooh. Well, I shouldn't do ooh.
Maybe not.
Anyway, so sources, let's get that knocked out because there's about 30 billion of them. The Commandant of Auschwitz autobiography. You know what I should call sources? Just hyperfixation area.
Ah, yes.
Because that's what happens. It's a hyper... we were talking about, doing a video saying, like, what was our process on picking things? And I was like, there is no process for me. It just happens. It's a hyperfixation, and then I just don't stop.
Don't stop, won't stop.
So the Commandant of Auschwitz, which is the autobiography by Rudolph Hoess himself. KL, A History of Nazi Concentration Camps by Niklaus Waschmann. Third Reich, The Rise and Fall on Netflix. Nazi Death Marches, 1944 to 1945. Nazis at Nuremberg, The Lost Testimony. Telegraph UK, Smithsonian Magazine, Auschwitz.org, GeoPeople Everyday Science, The Holocaust Encyclopedia, Seton Hall University, World Holocaust Remembrance Center, Jewish Currents Organization, Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, Music and the Holocaust Organization, CNN, Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum, PBS, National Library of Medicine, BBC, History of Sorts blog, The Holocaust History Project, Jewish Virtual Library Organization, Facing History Organization, World War II Foundation, Jewish Gen Organization, I've already said that one, Nazis at Nuremberg, The Lost Testimonies. So last time we talked about his journey to Auschwitz, the prisoners, the guards, the zone of interest. Today we're going to pick up in the camp once again, but we're going to delve into the final solution, starting with a conversation of what was a day in Auschwitz like. And so I found a description written by Vincent Chattel, whose father had been interned at Vought concentration camp, as well as Mr. Richard Sufit, which is a Auschwitz survivor, and Mr. Van Horen, a Flossenburg survivor. I got some information on testimonies in several books, gen.org website, which hosts information for global Jewish genealogy if you want to look further into those sources. This is an amalgamation of testimony, so please know that this is generalized and that no 2 days were the same. Because, you gotta have a little variety, I guess, in your Nazi life. 4 a.m., you awake by capos barking, hurry up! You need to find your shoes first, because if you don't have them, you can't work. And if you can't work, you get fucking shot. So stolen shoes was kind of an issue.
Ooh.
I always knew Jordans were life or death, you know what I mean? Then you have to follow beaten bow, which is a military way of making a bed, except you just have a lumpy straw mattress to make into a nice, neat bed. And if you don't do it right, you get beaten. Now you attempt to get washed, but there are only a few facilities for hundreds of prisoners. So you either skip to attend roll call or you be late to roll call and suffer, guess what?
Getting
beaten. And sometimes the beatings are so bad, people die. For breakfast, you have a mess tin of 10 ounces of bread and some coffee. Rarely, if ever, you win the lotto of sausage with your bread or some margarine. But that's if you get a tin. There's a lot of times you don't, and when you do, the only solid food you will be given that day will be in that tin. Worse, the capos are real dicks, and they'll throw your food in the mud, or they'll bump into you, spill your coffee. You're like, oh, my bad. Real Regina George shit. Real Regina George.
I wouldn't have made it long, because the first time my coffee got spilled, I'd have acted up, and I'd have been done.
Straight to the chambers.
Yeah.
Roll call's next, and everybody is lined up in rows of 10, including those who have died the night before. They would be lined up in front of the barracks. And you'll be in roll call for hours because if one mistake occurs, it causes the counting to start all over. In the rain, the snow, storms, you must pay attention and remain 100% silent. Some people die during roll call itself, all of which would be sent to the crematories after the roll call. Now for work time, you march off to work by foot, and sometimes you'll have a drum or the camp orchestra. Sometimes you're even ordered to sing for the SS soldiers as you march. Next is the task of your actual job. Your day will be 12 to 14 hours long, if not longer, and the work will be very hard and sometimes even useless. Things like carrying sandbags from one point to another, extracting large stones, or maybe you're even in a factory where everything is done as fast as possible or else you'll be beat. And again, some people die from those beatings. Lunch comes with a whistle, but it's not like you have food. When the whistle to resume starts, your body is aching with pain and hunger, and it makes you feel like each limb is thousands of pounds and every movement a concerted effort. A prisoner faints from hunger, he gets beaten. If he doesn't rise, he is killed, and you are to bring his body back to camp for evening roll call.
Fuck.
The evening whistle blows, and you and your fellow prisoners walk back to camp holding bodies. Sometimes they make you sing. Now it's time for roll call again, and rows of 10, the capos are counting. Sometimes people will attempt to escape, and you're going to remain in that roll call until that person is returned, even if that means hours. Sometimes 10 hours or more. This is also the moment where those that were chosen by SS for punishments and hangings would be announced. Well, you worked all day, and now you're going to come down to this awful lotto. Sometimes you get marched in front of the gallows so you can see the hanged prisoner as a warning. Dinner is a weird mystery soup that is 99% liquid and mostly of no dietary substance. If you did spare some bread from the morning, you eat it now with your soup. But I doubt that happened, if ever.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time to retire to your barracks where you're going to remain locked down for the rest of the night. The block leader or the capo would sometimes let you sleep, but sometimes decide to have fun by torturing you with exercises until you faint. If you do sleep, you're going to share a bed with several others, 5 or more at least, with a urine-soaked sheet, if one at all, on a straw mattress that more than likely is infested with lice and other vermin. The barracks is so cold and everyone is thin from starving, so cold is a constant state, but if you made it this far, you survived the day.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I wonder what was people's will to live.
I've thought about that often because there have been people that like literally just, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to die. Go ahead and take me now. And then there's a lot of people who are still scraping by in this, what seems like almost impossible conditions. And I'm like, I can't imagine.
I don't know where they get the mental strength to. It doesn't seem like it's going to get better.
And your mental acuity is going to completely change as you starve.
Yeah.
You know, as your body eats its brain, basically. I don't know. So let's talk about music. Segue.
Okay.
It would seem ill-placed at a camp, but the Nazis loved them some jams. Okay. Earlier, I spoke about the camp musicians, and truly it's such a unique role that it saved quite a few people's lives. In December 1940, the first band was created in Auschwitz, of course. It had 7 musicians and their instruments, a violin, percussion, double bass, accordion, trumpet, and a saxophone. And most were amateur musicians. Eventually, it would grow into 80 players and a brass band of 120. With the success of the bands, they formed subsequent ones in the men's camp, the gypsy camp, the women's camp, and sub-camps. I did see it described as like one camp leader would see it and hear about it, like, oh my God, I need a camp too. They would play for marches and during executions, during SS dinners. Their music lingered in the air with the smell of death. One musician, trumpeter Hermann Schachnowitz, spoke of his duty. Every morning we played as the inmate work crews departed, the same in the evening when they returned to the camp. We played on other occasions too, especially during executions, which usually occurred on Sunday afternoons or evenings. Perhaps they intended to drown out the last protests and final curses with music, a grotesque spectacle that had been ordered at the highest level, and the SS men surrounded us with loaded weapons. They would use music sometimes as like a quiet defiance, sneaking in songs like the Polish national anthem. Franz Dannemann described how Leonore's overture from Beethoven's Fidelio, performed by the official band during roll call in the summer of 1943, strengthened his will to survive. I was aware of the similarity of our situation to Florestan's in the last act. He should have died as a witness to Pizarro's misdeeds, just as the SS pursued the destruction of the prisoners. But the music warned us not to despair and lose hope. Behind my words, you're hearing Lenore Overture No. 3 by Daniel Barenboim of the West-Eastern Divan Orchestra. The women's camp would be written about in the 70s, a memoir by Fania Finland, who was a survivor and played in the band. There would also be a movie made from this, and other survivors would say there was a lot of incorrect and false information. It is now generally accepted as historical fiction since there has been several more memoirs on the women's band. One survivor is Anita Lasker-Wallfish, who is very well known. She's 99 years old and still spicy as ever. a cellist by profession, but that cello had also saved her life, as it was difficult to source a cellist at the time. She was in the documentary Shadow of the Commandant on Hulu, which is about Rudy's autobiography, his life as Commandant of Auschwitz, his children and his grandchildren's experience as being relatives of the Commandant. She meets the son Hans in person, and she and her daughter speak of the trauma she endured and how it affected the generations after. 10 out of 10 recommend this. Anita is still active in giving interviews and educating people on the Holocaust. Having grown up in a non-practicing Jewish family, she speaks about what it was like in that time, with her thoughts being very straight to the point and factual. You would love her, truly. To be a person who has been personally asked to play Schumann's Traumerei by Josef Mengele, which is what you're hearing, and then living every day hoping the safety of your cello would take you to the next, is one of the strongest examples of human strength I have ever seen. So that's a Mengele hit. You know what I'm saying? I know that was a little bit of a detour of information, but daily life and music were very much an influence on Hoess himself. He created this camp from the ground up with just sticks and rubber bands like a white supremacist MacGyver. But if like MacGyver was truly evil and a sadistic person, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
As with every military system, you must debrief your superiors, and after grueling work, it was time to give Himmler some of his first reports and, of course, receive critiques and orders. Not only would Rudy report his progress, but his difficulties as well. Himmler would brush off any and every complication and demand compliance. By January, Auschwitz would have 7,000 prisoners, most of them Polish. Himmler visited in March of 1941, where he would tour for the first time. At this point in the war, you're looking at an estimate of 25,000 total prisoners in the concentration camp system.
Mhm.
That's the entire system, right? He would lay out the Reich's plans to increase the size of Auschwitz, just Auschwitz, from 10,000 as planned to become a peacetime establishment that can hold 30,000. There would be armament factories and research farms moving out to Poland as well. Himmler would order that the camp supply 10,000 prisoners for forced labor to construct an IG Farben factory complex at Dwory, which is about a mile away. This is also where he would declare that this point forward, this is Himmler, that no Jew would be released from any camp whatsoever, with the exception of the Jews who already had visas in hand. He would allow those to immigrate until April, but after that, all bets are off. It is also important to note that in April 1941, Germany would make the SS the authorized supplier of Zyklon B, meaning that they could use it with no oversight. Despite it being out of custom, Rudy did relay their water supply drainage, building and staffing problems, and Himmler waved it off, saying like, bro, I'm not asking how you're going to do it. You're just going to do it and have it done like I want, period. Quote. Just kidding. This would require Hoess pretty much sourcing all the materials himself, as Germany couldn't or wouldn't send the supplies. They were in war, and all supplies were strictly kept and disseminated only when they felt necessary. So instead of building a brand new facility, he had to use the buildings that were bombed out and left in the zone slated for Auschwitz. Even barbed wire felt impossible to find, with Rudy directing soldiers to break down old armaments abandoned in fields to get leftover wire needed to line the tops of the perimeter of the camp. Also, like, I'm sitting there thinking about it, like, it wasn't like they had the best protective gear. I would hate to have been that soldier on that duty. I'm going to need you to break down all this barbed wire and then put it up in little bundles.
Yeah.
Here are these little dainty gloves for you.
It's that.
God. Oh, wait, never mind. They had slave labor. I forget.
Well, at first that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, well, that's good. They had the soldiers doing it, but
No, just
it's
kidding.
essentially dig your own grave, build your own prison.
Pretty much. There you go. He would say he became disillusioned with his comrades and just avoid any kind of social contact. To me, this says it's like, look, I wasn't really into this. I was just a cog in this machine. But truly, when you look at the accounts of Rudy and his wife Hedwig, they were both deeply anti-Semitic, and with Hedwig telling people that they wholeheartedly believed in the Nazi vision. How he really feels does get read between the lines, where he's more frustrated at the lack of intelligence, sloppiness, and lack of cooperation in his directives. To me, that's his true character. He was a Mengele of sorts in that he really took deep consideration into effectively and efficiently conducting mass killings and extermination of Jews. That his role wasn't a faux scientific view, but one that I'm gonna be the very best that no one ever was. Bum, bum. And he's gonna make Daddy Himmler proud. Okay? That was
Good
his
for him.
big goal. He would say that it was him and him alone that would be responsible to create this large camp out of nothing, and nothing provided, and that it was accomplished with no help of his subordinates. So basically, I did
this
all on my back. It's my work, my blood, sweat, and tears, not my slave labor. No, none of that. So in June 1941, it would be the beginning of what would be millions upon millions of murders by Hitler via Himmler, which when they announced the final solution of the Jewish question. I always thought that was very weird that they always framed it like that. Their answer for the Jewish question. I didn't know that was a question.
Didn't know it was a question either.
But apparently to them, they had one. I'm like, apparently Google could have solved a lot of problems in those days. Rudy would recall, in the summer of 1941, he gave me the order to prepare installations at Auschwitz where mass exterminations could take place, and personally to carry out these exterminations. I did not have the slightest idea of their scale or consequences. It was certainly an extraordinary and monstrous order. Nevertheless, the reasons behind the extermination program seemed to me right. I did not reflect on it at that time. I had been given an order and I had to carry it out. Whether this mass extermination of the Jews was necessary or not was something on which I could not allow myself to form an opinion, but I lack the necessary breadth of view. Basically, like, I was given an order. I'm just doing my job. I mean, it's not up to me to be questioning them. They know why we're doing it. They got the good reasons.
Yeah, it's just because they're Jews. No other reason.
That's it. What would happen would be a large invasion by the Einsatzgruppen eastward through Operation Barbarossa. This operation would carry out the plan of mass exterminations in two ways. First, through death squads that would kill thousands as they pushed war further east to the occupied parts of the Soviet Union. And when I say thousands, I mean it. There were several massacres. The Babi Yar massacre, which was a ravine where 34,000 Jews would be stripped of their items, put in the ravine, and then shot by machine gun fire. The Rambula massacre killed 25,000 Jews in Latvia. I've seen several accounts on these death squads, and it's startling because you would think that most of these soldiers didn't want to, but the facts were just so different. On one such account, I saw that it was a unit of soldiers being told of their orders and asking if anyone who does not want to shoot to please stay behind, that they were not going to be punished. Nothing was going to be done to these soldiers. They wanted people who were going to be in 100% agreement and compliancy with these orders. 100% agreement and compliant with these orders. A witness stated that the first soldier to get out of formation began to be cursed by his unit leader when the commander of the unit stopped him. And he said, no, we're not doing that. He's allowed to not do this. And so all these other soldiers started like, oh, if you don't want to, I don't want to. It wasn't that many, surprisingly. The rest who did not object to this went out in the woods and would systematically shoot groups upon groups of Jews.
I do have to say, in my opinion, there were probably, I'm not saying all of them, I think a large amount of them wanted to, but I do have to say some of them probably didn't want to. But if you're telling me I have to go kill all these people and it's cool if I don't want to, you'll let me go home, I'm going to have to say, it's a trap.
Yes.
That you're not really going to let me go home. So I don't know that I would volunteer to walk out, regardless if I wanted to do it or not, because the task is to kill people, and you're telling me you're not going to kill me if I don't kill them.
Mm-hmm.
The math ain't mathin'. So I do have to say, in my personal opinion, I think there was probably a lot that didn't want to do it. But I don't trust you that you're not going to hurt me and I can just go home and live my life and all's good and gravy. I don't believe
You're
that.
correct, though. You're correct in this. But the thing was, they treated them like social pariahs.
Yeah.
They would not kill them. They wouldn't punish them. They would socially punish them. And like pretty much call them cowards to their faces. And they left them in. They didn't remove their ranks or anything like that.
I'm sure they weren't getting paid.
They were getting paid.
Oh.
They're all getting paid. But they would be the outsiders. And
well, I would have been
for
fine
some
with being
people
the outsider.
some people that was just too much. And that's how you get, like, between people who didn't want to jump out of line because they know it was a trap, or two, the outsiders, it just kind of makes everybody go, well, I don't have a fucking choice.
Right.
Yeah.
They say you have a choice, but you don't have a choice.
You never did. You never did. One soldier, he would learn of the Jew that he was about to kill owned the very theater from his little tiny town that he had patronized so many times. Regardless, It was one after another that they would shoot, including women and children, even babies. Because babies grow up to be big Jews. That's literally how many times I've read it so many times. Like, the reason we have to kill the kids, guys, is because the kids will grow up. They're cute when they're babies, but then they become Jew demons when they're grown. Like, what? So the babies, to conserve bullets, they would have the mothers hold the babies and shoot through the mother's chest.
Oh, okay.
Just like a 2-for-1 deal.
I'm glad we're using big brain energy.
Mm-hmm. And then if they didn't want to use bullets, they would just slam the baby's body against the tree.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
I think if I had the choice between shooting a baby or slamming it against a tree, I'd have to opt with shooting. Not that I want to do either one because they'd both be terrible, but you really got to be a sicko to slam a baby against a tree to kill him.
Seriously. I don't know how you could frame that in any way whatsoever that seems humane.
There's not.
And not even like we all had choices not to do this. You literally could just drop your gun. But whatever. Anyways, who am I?
Who am I?
Just a girl
doing a podcast
with her best friend.
That's it.
The second phase would be the death camps, which Auschwitz would play an ugly, pivotal role in. In the camps, they began experimenting with gases while they conducted mass shootings. In both phases, the Nazis did take into account how much of a toll this would take on their soldiers. So they were working on a more effective solution to preserve their mental health as they carried out this solution.
Okay.
You guys are killing so many, it's fucking your brains up. So
we're going to have a pizza party.
Yes. Just like the corporate rule dictates. We're going to have a pizza party, and then we're going to come up with gas chambers so you guys don't have to do it no more. Prior to the final solution, Nazi Germany had already been working on ways to kill prisoners in camps more effectively through Action 14F13, also called Sonderbehandlung, special treatment. This action is what you would hear about basically in death camps. Those too weak or ill or mentally unstable to work were to be euthanized, as it was more compassionate in the views of Nazi ideology. Just not even letting them live is not an option. Just, these are baddies. This was after some forced sterilizations, of course, because racial purity can't happen if you let weirdos like me procreate.
Sure.
They began using carbon monoxide during this program, which began in the late 1930s and would technically end in 1941, although it never really went away. This standard to kill those they deemed that was not worthy was the heart of the killing camps, and the use of the gas opened the doors in ways that they shouldn't have. This T4 method sparked many insane inventions, including the death vans, where they would have mobile death units to kill on the go. It sounds crazy.
Uber before Uber was a thing, or DoorDash before DoorDash was a thing. We're going to DoorDash your murder right to your home.
Make it convenient for you. I hear right now it's
you
$0 delivery fee. Okay,
we'll come to you.
Jesus. In September 1941, the eastward movement brought more death and prisoners of war being transported to the camps. Around the September 5th, Auschwitz would get a train from Neuhammer War Camp in Lower Silesia. They were all Soviet POWs identified by police as quote-unquote unacceptable, and they would be led to the infamous Block 11. Block 11 was used for tortures and executions. It had a death wall where they would have shooting squads, and it's still erected today. The building is still there, and it's
awesome.
Just as chilling.
Just awesome.
Yeah. It also hosted special torture chambers in which various punishments were applied to prisoners. Some could include being locked in a dark chamber for days or being forced to stand in one of their standing cells called the Stehzelle in German. Punishments in these compartments, which were 1 square meter total, was like you just putting 4 prisoners in there, and then everybody's kind of forced to stand. And they would remain standing all night, up to 20 nights, and go to work during the day.
How'd they even survive 20 nights?
That's what, bruh. There's so many times that I'm like, the amount of people that did survive such crazy fucking things is, I don't even know how words to describe it, really.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Zyklon B, though, for a minute. You know what I mean? Real light stuff. It's a prussic acid, and they've been using it to kill the rodents in the camp for some time. The inventor of Zyklon B is Fritz Haber, who is surprisingly a German Jew. Fritz received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1918 for his invention of the Haber process, a method used in industry to synthesize ammonia from nitrogen gas and hydrogen gas. This invention is important for the large-scale synthesis of fertilizers and explosives. He was also a World War I veteran, having fought for Germany and helped create and endorse many new types of chemical weapons and masks to protect soldiers from those gases. He would say that death was death, no matter what caused it to be inflicted, and referred to history, quote, "The disapproval that the knight had for the man with the firearm is repeated in the soldier who shoots with steel bullets towards the man who confronts him with chemical weapons. The gas weapons are not at all more cruel than the flying iron pieces. On the contrary, the fraction of fatal gas diseases is comparatively smaller than mutilations of munitions."
So you're saying it's nicer?
Yeah. Like, listen, this is 100% rate. You might miss in a gun. He chillingly discovered that the long exposure of a low concentration of gas was just as lethal as a high concentration in a short time, which would be called Haber's rule. He would be highly respected and honored for the time being. Between World War I and World War II, he would become director of Dagesh, which was a German chemical corporation that manufactured pesticides. It would be here that he created cyanide-based pesticide Zyklon, before Zyklon B. While Zyklon would become banned because of the similar chemicals being used in World War I's warfare, eventually Dagesh would be bought out by another chemical company in 1922, where scientists started working on Zyklon again. Cyanide, which is what Zyklon is kind of made of, is volatile as water and air. So to make it less volatile, they devised a method of packaging hydrogen cyanide in a sealed canister along with a cautionary eye irritant and several absorbents like diatomaceous earth, and that would be what Zyklon B is. IG Farben, which was the chemical company that they were building using slave labor and providing slave labor to work there, they manufactured the canisters. They put them in that form to help make it safer to transport.
Yeah, we wouldn't want any of them to die.
That cautionary eye irritant, that was put in there so whoever was handling it would know, oh shit, that shit's getting out, run. But they were like, that's making it take too long, so you're gonna take that out. So they took that out. Jesus. Fritz would be alarmed at the rise of National Socialism in Germany. He was shocked when they came after him, seeing how he converted to Christianity and had provided great service to Germany in World War I. But nah, dog. Hitler still saw you as a Jew, so he left as Germany in 1933 and would only live a year before passing in Switzerland at 65. That always makes me think of the leopards eating faces. It's like some kind of a political party thing where these people were voting a certain way, and it was not really that great. And then something came back and it hurt one of their own voters. And they're like, I didn't know the leopards were going to eat my face.
Mm.
So like, oh.
It's okay if when you.
It's okay if it's not happening to you.
Yeah.
But when it happens to you.
It's bad now.
It's bad. But like, I did my part. I converted. I'm not a Jew anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, they don't care about that.
Mm-mm.
They cared about bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
So what does Zyklon B do to the body? After dropping the canister into the chamber, the warm air causes the gas to emit into the room, filling the air. It enters the bloodstream by the lungs and mucous membranes, while part of the acid has a chemical reaction turning it into cyanide. From there, it attacks cells, particularly the mitochondria of the cell.
The powerhouse.
Oh my God, I love it because I did that. I'm like, the powerhouse of the cell, if you recall from science class. My girl knew it. My girl knew it.
I did.
I never known her to be wrong. It causes the cell to no longer be able to, I like how we were like cheering for that in the middle. I'm like, let me tell you what it does though. It causes the cell to no longer be able to take oxygen in, which fuels cells. And without oxygen, the cells die, and therefore you succumb to asphyxiation, leading quickly to your death.
At least it was quick.
I don't think it was really that quick. Knowing this, let's go back to those Soviet prisoners. The Soviet POWs would be led into the sealed chamber where they would find other prisoners, although they were all in a dire state or invalid of some sort. So, like, we got off a train. We're all, like, prisoners. And we go into a room, and it looks like all these people on death's doorstep. So this was raising every red flag with them. They didn't have long to think, though, because once they were all ushered in the room, they literally threw the Zyklon B in there and shut the door.
Mm.
The gas came in contact with the warm bodies and air and began to quickly fill the room. Immediately, the poison literally melted their mucous membranes, and their screams became choking noises. All of them would pass, despite some of them tearing pieces of clothes off of their bodies and stuffing them into their mouth and nose to prevent the gas from getting in. Rudy would watch this whole thing behind the safety of a gas mask, congratulating himself for killing hundreds of prisoners without firing a single bullet. But like all Nazis, he saw room for improvements. So let's talk about that. Firstly, Block 11 was soups far from the crematorium chambers, which meant that to dispose of their bodies,
They had a long way to drag them.
they had to schlep them all the way across the clamp. And that's just not going to do anything for morale. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-mm.
Next, Block 11 had no ventilation. So not only did they have to move the bodies across camp, they'd have to wait hours for the gas to disperse first. And by then, the rigor mortis would have set in, and all these bodies were basically tangled in, and they'd have to be trying to pull bodies apart to
Bless their
transport them.
hearts. I'm so sorry.
It's very difficult being a Nazi, you know. A witness of these early chamber cleanups was a Polish prisoner named Adam Sarkarski. Quote, "The scene was truly eerie because no one could see that these people had scratched and bitten each other in a fit of madness before they died. Many had torn uniforms. Although I had already gotten used to some of the macabre scenes in the camp, I became sick when I saw these murdered people, and I had to vomit violently."
Mm.
In his biography, Rudy would speak on his thoughts as he witnessed and participated in these atrocities, saying that he was thinking what he assumed many soldiers and SS officers were thinking when they saw women and children walk into the gas chamber. They thought about their wives and their children.
Of course.
But the same man said, quote, "Jews have strongly developed family feelings. They stick together like limpets. Nevertheless, according to my observations, they lack solidarity." And then he would go on to say, quote, "I have certainly watched them close enough, but I have never really been able to get to the bottom of their behavior. The Jews' way of living and of dying was a true riddle that I never managed to solve." It's not a fucking riddle to solve, son.
It's not.
It's a fucking religion.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me wipe away this indignation and continue the story. This to me shows that they aren't people but animals to be dealt with personality. And so how can you connect feelings of your family? Like you think about your wife and children when you see these victims, but you don't stop them when you have every ounce of ability to stop them.
Right.
I say that because there were other Nazis who towed the line and were not into killing. Like there was literally people who were like, I am kind of fucking stuck here. I don't really believe in all this, but I also don't want to get murdered.
Right.
And so those were the ones that would help resistance efforts and stuff. And I'm not sure what the statistics are on that, but I'm sure we would have been amongst them of the ones that were like, oh fuck. Yeah. I don't believe any of this. Oh shit, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
I'm going to die.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I get the chills on that one. Like, oh, I don't want to do it. Don't make me a Nazi.
Imagine poor little baby JJ and Jimmy.
Oh
They'd be
my
like,
God.
oh God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
They would have died of heart attacks.
Yes.
I can't handle this. They can't even handle paper cuts.
Right.
Okay. Ever growing as the plans dictated, construction of the Auschwitz to Birkenau camp called, this is a long one, Kriegsgefangenenlager. No. Kriegsgefangenenlager.
That's perfect.
Close enough. Prisoner of war camp on blueprints. And it began in October of 1941 in Brzezinka, which is about 3 kilometers from Auschwitz the First. This is part of Himmler's order to expand Auschwitz. This would create a second complex on the other side of the rail tracks and would be called Auschwitz II or Birkenau. A third portion would be a work camp with workers being supplied to IG Farben, the nearby factory. Whenever the prisoners couldn't work anymore, though, they would send them back and get fresh ones. And those would be sent straight to the crematories because they weren't worthless. They weren't worth anymore. So it's literally disposable.
That's sad.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really, this is all sad.
It is. I mean, and it's hard to sit here and make jokes at the same time, but it's like we're super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's hard. I enjoyed learning about this because it really expanded these things that I never knew before,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it comes with that cost of just
Knowing.
soul crushing sadness.
Yeah.
You know. So it was planned to have 4 segments but although only the first 3 would be built. It would feature more crematoriums, a women's and men's barracks, infirmaries, SS quarters, just everything you need for a death machine. It would stay under construction for the entire time of its operation, and in the end, it would grow from a single camp with 22 buildings in 1940 to become a complex of 3 main camps and 40 subcamps. The workers would go on from being mostly Soviet POWs to mostly Jews as the war progressed, and the final solution was put into place. To build it, they sent 10,000 Russian POWs, the best they apparently had at the Lambsdorff POW camp. They marched them over 90 miles.
Jesus Christ.
And they stopped, they stopped and let them rest and eat along the way. But they didn't supply the food. They told them to
go
graze.
Hunt a squirrel?
No, they told them to graze in the fields like they were fucking cattle.
Jesus Christ.
Like, you guys like grass, right? What? So by the time they showed up at Auschwitz, they were extremely poor condition, with Rudy saying, quote,
You think?
Yeah. Quote, I remember very clearly how we were continually giving them food when they first arrived at the base camp, but in vain. Their weakened bodies could no longer function. Their whole constitution was finished and done for. They died like flies from general physical exhaustion or from the most trifling maladies with which their debilitated constitutions could no longer resist. I saw countless Russians die while in the act of swallowing root vegetables or potatoes.
Jesus Christ.
So the hunger had made them into shadows of themselves, with Hoess saying, cases of cannibalism were not rare in Birkenau. I myself came across a Russian lying between piles of bricks whose body had been ripped open, the liver removed, and they would beat each other to death for food. Later on, he would say, when the foundations for the first group of buildings were being dug, the men often found bodies of Russians who had been killed by their fellows, partly eaten, and then stuffed in a hole in the mud. The mysterious disappearance of many Russians were explained this way.
Mm.
By the summer of 1942, only a few hundred of that 10,000 POWs survived. Which is crazy that he even survived that long.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that just 2 months after the expansion of Auschwitz began, Pearl Harbor would occur in December 1941. That night, the very night that Pearl Harbor happened, it is said that Sir Winston Churchill, quote, went to bed and slept the sleep of the saved. The reason being is that he knew that America was going to be absolutely compelled to enter the war the very next day. And they did. They declared war on Japan, and they were allies with Germany, so ipso facto, everybody's at war. It's a World War II. To me, this created a ripple in Germany's plans and made what would happen next in Auschwitz a fast reality. Next, the time came to begin finessing their mass murder plans, from the selection process to how to handle that many corpses. And it's going to be, listen, it's already been awful. We already talked about babies and stuff being killed, but it's just going to continue to keep getting worse. So if you have a sensitive stomach, sorry, maybe don't listen. Maybe wait until we have another series. Becky doesn't have a choice, okay?
I don't.
Selection was the first step, and it would happen at the train platform. There would be 3 train platforms on the inside of Auschwitz. One in Auschwitz 1, then you have the Auschwitz to Birkenau train platform, and then the one built between the 2 facilities. The last one being built was the Birkenau one, which was built in 1943 and began being used in 1944 and was probably the most infamous one. Like, as things progressed through the war, it went from somewhat semblance of neatness and, order to just complete utter chaos at all times.
Oh, I'm sure.
The soldiers didn't like to call it selection as much as they said it was decommissioning, like they were old computers. The first step, once they were off the train, was to separate people by sex. Next, they began parsing them out by who could work and who could not. Elderly, visibly pregnant women, small children under 16, which later got dropped to 14, would be sent immediately to the gas chambers. Others who appeared on a brief and superficial inspection by an SS doctor could be found not to be fit for work. Practically any fault, scars, bandages, boils, emaciation, that might be enough of a reason to say, "Nah, not fit for work. Send them to the chamber."
Jesus.
Those who couldn't serve a purpose were usually disposed of quickly. I say purpose because not only were they used for labor, they were used as experiments, like in the case of Josef Mengele. He would not be placed at Auschwitz until 1943. However, there were science experiments and other ghastly medical things happening before the Angel of Death came to Auschwitz. If you did not get chosen for death, you would then be processed where you would have your dignity and humanity taken and be turned into a tattooed number. 1 in 5 were chosen to be in the work camp, which is about 20% of all the people who were brought to the camps. So 20% of the people that came off that train stayed alive from the get-go. The medical experiments, the need for human guinea pigs, well, that was infamous in Auschwitz. They worked hard to study sterilization and other things like castration, experiments causing premature termination of pregnancy, and carried it out on pregnant and childbearing women, experiments of artificial insemination, and also weirdly aimed at cancer research.
Okay, sure. That's just what you threw in there.
You'll be terrified to know that a lot of Nazi medical experiments have been used in modern medicine research. What I mean is that these highly unethical experiments were done, and years later, some scientists have tried to justify using information from these experiments to help develop medical advancements. It's quite a touchy subject, and rightly so. A lot of lives were tortured and died for this information needlessly, and the debate of whether to use this information now is a question of ethics. Thank you. I was like, I was reading a BBC article by Frank Swain, who spoke to some of the doctors and scientists to see their opinions. So this is like today's time. The basic intuition is that if information had been obtained unethically, but we use that information, then we become complicit in that past.
Just what I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. This is a common view, actually, amongst those who, discuss the use of these kind of findings. Writing in the bioethics journal, the Hastings Center report in 1984, Christine Moe recounts a conversation with John Hayward, a leading expert in hypothermia at the University of Victoria, British Columbia, who used Nazi data in his studies. Quote, "I don't want to have to use this data, but there's no other and will be no other in the ethical world. I rationalized it a little bit, but not to use it would be equally bad."
It is a very, it's like if we learned that we can do blah, blah, blah to save people from this, do we or do we not? It is a hard thing.
She would point out, "I think it's very important to say that these findings very rarely provide key important information in isolation. For the most part, scientific information is like a piece in a jigsaw. It fits into an overall puzzle." But she would ultimately say, what I think is quite the truth. If we do use this research, it expresses the attitude that this research was okay and encourage future researchers that history will judge me positively if I use this research. And we do not want to do that. We don't want to promote unethical research. So like if I use this unethical, then someone's going to come down the line and say, well, for science, I need to go ahead and do this. It might not be ethical, but I'm going to do it and someone's going to use this information someday.
Right.
It's just a wormhole we don't need to go down.
Mm-hmm.
To make things even more disturbing, there's Operation Paperclip. Have you heard of that?
I have, but go ahead. It's refresh my memory. You're going to anyway.
It's definitely one of those. Unless you're into weird shit, like we are, you might not know about it. So, it brought over 1,600 Nazi scientists, researchers, and medical professionals to be used in our military to aid our fight in the Cold War. So, that's a whole different wormhole. There are NASA scientists that were Nazis in the 50s.
Well, yeah, because when we did the A-bomb, we brought a bunch of them over and saved them to come over and help us to make the bomb.
I didn't find a whole lot of information to directly tie Hoess to all the medical stuff, except in his affidavit written in Nuremberg. Quote, "We receive from time to time special prisoners from the local Gestapo office. The SS doctors killed such prisoners by injections of benzene. Doctors had orders to write ordinary death certificates and could put down any reason at all for the cause of death. From time to time, we conducted medical experiments on women inmates, including sterilization and experiments relating to cancer. Most of the people who died under these experiments have already been condemned to death by the Gestapo." So, They were
They're
going to
gonna
die
die
anyway. So while he was super focused on the efficiency in gassing whole swaths of people and then burning their corpses, he was still highly aware of all the other atrocities that were happening in addition to his own. They had already been murdering people, but now came the time for to be more strategic in the process and really finesse those plans. You know what I mean?
I mean,
How are you going to make it to Carnegie Hall? Practice.
you always need to be more efficient.
They relocated those gassings from Block 11 to the crematorium outside the camp, which made it less visible. So it made it subject to less unwelcome witnesses. So nobody's going to just like happen to stance into there. It already had ventilation, so all they had to do was make sure they could seal the doors effectively, and then they punched a hole in the roof for the gas canister to be dropped in.
Oh, great. Good job, guys.
This became the prototype for the Nazi gas chamber systems. Further, it could hold up to 700 people at a time.
Excellent.
They had another test in September, more POWs who were told to get completely nude for delousing. Once inside the chamber with the door shut, they dropped the canister, and Rudy would recall, quote, after the insertion, some screamed gas, followed by mighty howling and pushing toward the two doors, but the doors held.
Of course they did.
After their deaths, it would take days for the bodies to be burned, but Rudy was relieved to have come up with a solution that was less intense than the murdering squads. Quote, I was shuddered at the prospect of carrying out exterminations by shooting when I thought of the vast numbers concerned and of the women and children. The shooting of hostages and the group executions ordered by the Reichsführer SS or by the Reich Security Head Office had been enough for me. I was therefore relieved to think that we could be spared all these bloodbaths, and the victims too would be spared their suffering in their last moment came. Listen, all that howling, the scratching, people literally tearing pieces. I can't tear my clothes. Like, can you tear your shirt in half? I can't. I'm not Hulk Hogan. The fact that these people in that fury tore pieces of their clothing off to stuff in their face.
Well, I'm guessing their clothing was pretty ragged, but
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I don't think they had a nice shirt on like you do.
His concern for the soldiers was also noted, quote, many gruesome scenes are said to have taken place. People running away after being shot, the finishing off of the wounded, and particularly of the women and children. Many members of the Einsatzkommandos, unable to endure wading through the blood any longer, had committed suicide. Some had even gone mad. Most of these members of commandos had to rely on alcohol when carrying out their horrible work. According to Hoess' description, the men employed at Globnik's extermination centers consumed amazing quantities of alcohol.
Oh, I'm sure.
After being murdered, the Sonderkommandos would come in and begin stripping the victims of hair and gold in their teeth and any artificial limbs or anything else that wasn't removed from the bodies prior to death. I don't know if I said what a Sonderkommando
All I can
is.
picture when you talk about
I did not. Okay.
removing the gold teeth is when that guy gets in a cage with a dino to pull his tooth out,
Yes.
and then the dino eats him.
Exactly. So
Except sadly, the Jews did not come back to life and kill him.
that would be
Beautiful.
10 out of 10. Teach us Nazis a thing or two. A Sonderkommando is actually also a prisoner, but they were prisoner workers that really mostly handled the gas chambers. They were not in there very long. Like, they weren't a Sonderkommando. They were killed regularly and at irregular intervals, so nobody knew who was going to die and everything. But they handled all the disposal of the bodies. It wasn't the Nazis.
Of course it wasn't.
Yeah. It was these little fellas. Quote, the bodies had to be taken from the gas chambers after the gold teeth had been extracted and the hair cut off. They had to be dragged to the pits or to the crematoria. Then the fires in the pits had to be stoked. The surplus fat drained off and the mountain of burning corpses constantly turned over so the draught might fan the flames. The hair was a commodity, actually. I don't know if you know that.
I did
didn't.
not.
I
but
did not.
Thanks for sharing.
This was a new thing for me. They would dry it above the crematoriums. So, like, they would cut it off the bodies, put it above the crematories, and sell it in large batches because it was used to make socks for submarine crews. It was also used to make felt stockings for railroad workers. It even they used the hair to make ignition mechanism for bombs, ropes, cords for ships, stuffing, and mattresses.
It's lovely.
Mm-hmm. The gold was sent to the SS Health Service and used by dentists to treat the SS and their families. 50 kilograms had been collected by October 8th, 1942, and by early 1944, 10 to 12 kilograms of gold was being extracted monthly. from victims' teeth.
That's nice.
Because these numbers aren't a perfect lens for truth at times, here's something that will sober you. A gold tooth is usually an average of 3 grams. 11 kilograms of gold is equal to 11,000 grams, meaning over 3,600 teeth were pulled from victims
That's nice.
in that 1 month. After that, they would cremate the bodies and throw the ashes out or use them for fertilizer. They even had large bone grinding machines to help pulverize the leftover bones as well, because cremating does not break down the bones. Remember, the Sonderkommando were also prisoners, so it was only a matter of time before someone they knew would be in that pile of bodies, as in an instance recalled by Rudy. Quote, once when the bodies were being carried from a gas chamber to a fire pit, a man from the special detachment, which was Sonderkommandos, suddenly stopped and stood for a moment as though rooted to the spot. Then he continued to drag a body out of body with his comrades. I asked the couple what was up. He explained that the corpse was that of the Jew's wife. I watched him for a while, but noticed nothing particular of his behavior. He continued to drag corpses along, just as he had done before. When I visited the detachment a little later, he was sitting with the others eating, as though nothing had happened. Was he really able to hide his emotions so completely, or had he become too brutalized to even care about this? And that's where we're going to leave off today.
Well, thank God, because...
Well, I'm not thank God for you, because you're going to be hearing this in quick succession.
Yeah, you're probably only going to get 2 of these out of me. I don't know that I can do 3. You're really bumming me out, dude.
Well, at least the third one is like mostly about his death and his downfall today, like the ending one. So
Yeah,
there's that.
We'll see.
So we're going to talk about, next time we're going to talk about Rudy's naughty little secret. And his big promotion into the Nazi big leagues. But definitely in the meantime, don't forget to find us on our socials. Jimmy is the one who's been handling our socials, you guys. He's been posting like crazy. We've been working on like all these different kinds of things and merch and stuff. It's been a lot of fun. TikTok has been huge. And if you found us on there, thank you for following us. Don't forget to let us know your own Too Close to Home stories. If something weird happened to you, let me know about it.
We're here for it.
I love alien abductions. But you know what I love even more? Bigfoot abductions. Were you Bigfoot's baby?
Same. I want to hear. Tell me all about it.
And don't forget to rate and subscribe on all the platforms you listen to. Apple, Spotify, Amazon. The more visibility, the more we get to spread us. So
that's right.
Until next time.
Stay safe.
Keep your head on a swivel.
And don't bring it so close to home that you use gold from the teeth of dead Nazi.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode of Too Close to Home, don't forget to rate and subscribe to us on most platforms. Follow us on our social media at Too Close Home Pod on Facebook, at Too Close Podcast on Instagram, or if you have your own Too Close to Home experience, shoot us your story at tooclosetohome@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening.